What's up, everybody? We are back with another March Madness predictions video for the upcoming NCAA tournament. And if you've been enjoying the content, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. But let's jump into it. We are back on ESPN looking at Joe Lunardi's most up-to-date bracketology for the 2025 NCAA tournament. But before we jump into our predictions, let's go ahead and look at an overview of the bracket and the bubble. So currently, you can see the top overall seed he has, the Auburn Tigers, which makes sense. Most dominant team this year in college basketball. Best resume, even with their loss this past week. First team out is Oklahoma, so we've been seeing the Sooners go in and out for quite some time now, but currently on the outside looking in. And then Xavier coming in as the last team in, so they've had a really good past couple of weeks to work their way into the bracket. Looking at the bubble, we can see our last four byes are Utah State, Georgia, Ohio State, and Arkansas. Last four in is San Diego State, Indiana, Boise State, and Xavier. So Boise State making a push there along with Xavier. First four out, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Texas, Nebraska. So North Carolina getting closer to being in the field. I'm assuming with a win against Duke and maybe some noise in the ACC tournament they'll be getting in. And then next four out, we see Colorado State, which has been one of the hottest teams in the country, along with Cincinnati, SMU, and Wake Forest. But let's go ahead and jump into the bracket. Starting off in the South region, we have the number one overall seed Auburn Tigers taking on either Southern or Bucknell at the 16 seed matchup. And obviously, I'm going to pick Auburn here. Had a great season so far, even with that loss. I'm not too nervous with how the Auburn Tigers are playing, so give me the Auburn to move on. Then we jump over to Kansas versus New Mexico. I think this would be a really great matchup. Bill Self and Kansas struggling as of late, lost their last two to Texas Tech and at Houston, although Kansas has put up a decent fight in those. New Mexico currently on a 3-game winning streak since losing back-to-back games and led by Donovan Dent. I think this would be a tough battle between the two teams, but I'm going to give it to the Kansas Jayhawks and trust that they're just not going to get upset in the first round, but I think this would be a really close matchup. Then we have Oregon taking on either Boise State or Xavier, and in that 12 game, I think I would go with Xavier. The way they've been playing is absolutely incredible. 6-game win streak currently, double-digit wins in 4 of those 6, and they're top 50 in both offense and defense and a great three-point shooting team. But Xavier taking on the 5-seeded Oregon Ducks. The Ducks have been great as of late as well. They're on their own 6-game winning streak, including a win against Wisconsin in overtime. They're top 50 in offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency, according to Bart Torvik. And one thing with Oregon is they compete with just about everyone. Don't really see them get blown out too often. And I think I like Dana Altman and the Ducks to take it in this one. Then we move on to the 4 versus 13 matchup where we see Arizona taking on Lipscomb. And Arizona, if you've watched any of my past videos, I do like Arizona, but they've been mediocre as of late. 3-3 in their last 6, and their wins aren't impressive really in that stretch. Wins against Baylor, Utah, and Arizona State. Taking on a Lipscomb team that's currently on a 5-game winning streak, 10-1 in their last 11. They don't turn the ball over, which I look for when I'm picking an upset in the NCAA tournament. Also rebound well, and they slow the pace down, so they're going to shorten the game. Lipscomb just advanced to the ASUN final on Sunday, which I'm expecting them to win and make it into the tournament. So give me Lipscomb in this matchup to get our first upset of the predictions so far. Moving on to the 6-11 matchup, we see Louisville taking on either San Diego State or Indiana. In that 11-seed game in the first 4, I like Indiana to come out of that, but I'm going to have to go with Louisville in the matchup. Chucky Hepburn has been playing great as of late. Louisville currently on an 8-game winning streak, top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, and really just playing like a team. And Pat Kelsey in his first year is going to get Louisville to at least the round of 32. Then we have St. John's versus Towson. Towson is one of the higher seeded teams that I'm looking to maybe pick as an upset pick, but Rip Pitino is not going to let that happen. I got to take St. John's in this one. Memphis versus Georgia. I actually don't like this matchup from Memphis at all. Georgia has been trending upwards as of late, won 3 straight, including that big game against Florida. They have a really good defense, top 25 in the country, led by Asa Newell, the 6'11 freshman who's averaging 15 and 7 on the year. Going up against a Memphis team that's led by PJ Haggerty. He's great in his own right, 21 points per game, and they've actually been playing well, but the American, not that great of a conference, and Georgia just seeing SEC team after SEC team. I like them in this matchup, so give me the Bulldogs. Then we have Michigan State taking on Robert Morris. I don't think there's going to be any 15-2 upset here. Tom Izzo and the Spartans are going to be moving on to the round of 32. All right, jumping back to the top, we have Auburn going up against Kansas, and Bruce Pearl and the Auburn Tigers are going to continue to win. Janiah Broom's going to be too much, even though this team isn't just him. You got Chad Bacon-Rosari, you got Tahad Pettiford, Denver Jones. They lost against Texas A&M recently, but I don't think that's going to happen against Kansas here. Give me the Auburn Tigers. Then we have Oregon taking on Lipscomb. I think Lipscomb is going to be a one-game winner and then lose in the round of 32, so I have to take the Ducks. Jackson Shellstad is one of those guys that you want on your team in clutch time, and if this game is close, I'd look to him to pull it out for Oregon, so give me the Ducks. Then we have Louisville taking on St. John's. What a great story this would be. Pat Kelsey in his first year with Louisville, Rick Pitino in his second year with St. John's. I think Kadari Richmond, RJ Luis are just going to be a little too much for this Louisville team to handle, as well as Zuby Ejiofor. St. John's has just been absolutely great. Every single game that they play is going to be a close game and one of the best defenses. I don't think Louisville's offense can stick with it, so give me St. John's to move on in this matchup. Then we have Georgia taking on Michigan State. I would like to see Asa Newell go up against Michigan State's defense. The way that Michigan State has been playing as of late, especially even in their most recent game against Iowa, they've been able to turn it on when they need to. Currently on a 6-game winning streak, and 5 of those wins coming against the best Big Ten teams, and just clinch the Big Ten regular season. I think I got to give it to Tom Izzo in this matchup to move to the second weekend. For our first matchup in the Sweet 16, we have Auburn going up against Oregon, which I think would be a great game. As I mentioned earlier, Oregon plays with everyone, it seems like, and I don't think they would get blown out in this one, but I'm going to have to give it to Auburn Tigers. There's just not much that's making me doubt this team. Then in our next matchup, we have St. John's versus Michigan State. I would love this matchup. 2 great coaches, Rick Pitino and St. John's taking on Tom Izzo and Michigan State. I think this would be a hard-fought game of both tough-nosed defenses on both sides of the ball. I think I like St. John's offense a little more than Michigan State, and that's just for the guys that they get the ball in their hands and they can go get you a bucket. RJ Lewis has been playing absolutely amazing this year to go along with the transfer from Seton Hall and Kadari Richmond. Those guys can go get you a bucket. I feel like I trust their guards a little more than I do Michigan State. So I got the Johnnies advancing to the Elite Eight, where they will be taking on the Auburn Tigers. And this is a matchup between 2 of the top defenses in the entire country. Auburn, with their incredible season and the SEC regular season winner, going up against St. John's, the Big East regular season title winner. And this game would be absolutely amazing to happen in the Elite Eight. I would love to see Rick Pitino get St. John's all the way to the Elite Eight, and because of that, I'm going to be taking them to the Final Four. I do think the St. John's team has something special. One stat I always come back to and I mention is they've only lost 4 times this year. It's been by a combined 7 points, so they are always in the game, more than likely winning them, but even when they lose, it's not by a blowout by any means. It's a close margin. They also are very good at offensive rebounding, and I think they can go right at the Auburn Tigers and get the win. So give me St. John's to be the first team to advance to the Final Four. Moving down to the West region, in our first matchup, we have the Florida Gators going up against Norfolk State. Don't think there's going to be too many issues in this one for the Florida Gators. They've been playing absolutely amazing this year and expecting them to make a run. Give me the Florida Gators moving on to the round of 32. Then we look at our 8-9 matchup where we see Creighton taking on West Virginia. Creighton team that's 3-1 on their last 4 and one of the best teams in terms of effective field goal percentage. They're top 50 in both offensive and defensive efficiency and led by Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's been having an absolute fantastic year so far for the Blue Jays. Going up against a West Virginia team that's more defensive minded. According to Torvik, currently top 10 in defense. They're 5-5 in their last 10 in the Big 12 though, and that's mainly due to the injuries that they sustained, specifically Tucker DeVries being out for the season. This team leans heavily on Javon Small, their stud point guard, to do everything for them. I don't think he's going to be able to do quite enough, so give me Creighton moving on in this matchup. Then we get to Michigan versus McNeese. Michigan currently lost 2 in a row, lost 3 out of their past 5. One thing about this Michigan team is when they win, they don't really blow any teams out, even the teams that you would expect them to do so. It always seems to be a close game. They do have a really good defense, but their offense has been falling off as of late and been turning the ball over a lot. And they're going up against a McNeese team that absolutely dominated the Southland Conference this year, 19-1, and won that regular season title. And they are a team that slows the pace down, but they also force a lot of turnovers, which I can see Michigan falling into. And so I'm going to be picking the McNeese Cowboys and Will Wade to make the upset in the first round and move on to the round of 32. They'll be taking on either Kentucky or High Point. In Kentucky, we just received some really unfortunate news for the Wildcats, and that's that their star guard, Jackson Robinson, is out after suffering an injury. They also have Lamont Butler, who's dealing with a shoulder injury. Otega Owe recently has been a little inconsistent. They're just 3-3 in their last 6. They're taking on a High Point team that's currently on one of the longest winning streaks in all of the country with a 12-game winning streak and actually just won the Big South Conference and has been playing absolutely amazing. They're top 20 in points per game, scoring 82.5 points on average. One of the best offensive teams at the mid-major level as well, and they get to the free throw line early and often. I actually like High Point in this matchup with all the injuries that Kentucky is currently dealing with, so give me High Point to move on and face McNeese in the round of 32. Then we have St. Mary's versus Arkansas. And I feel like I have to issue St. Mary's an apology. I've been doubting them recently, but they have been showing time and time again that they are the real deal. 7-game winning streak, just won the regular season in the WCC. Beat Gonzaga in both of their matchups. They're 11th in defensive rating according to KenPom and are already in the WCC semifinals. And going up against an Arkansas team that's 3-1 in their last 4, but they did just lose to South Carolina by 19 recently. It's a very athletic team, very talented team led by DJ Wagner, Janelle Davis, Zvonimir Visic, Aduthiero, but they can be really inconsistent on the offensive end. And when you're going up against a team like St. Mary's with the defense that they have, I just don't know if that's a good combination for the Razorbacks. So give me the Gales to move on in this matchup, and they'll take on either Wisconsin or Chattanooga. Chattanooga has had a great season so far in the SoCon, won the regular season title there, but going up a Wisconsin team that's one of the best offenses in the country, led by John Tonji, who's averaging 19 points per game. They're 7-3 in their last 10, 13-6 in the Big Ten. As I mentioned, one of the best offenses, but also a top 30 defense, according to Bart Torvik. This team has been looking great, and I'm expecting them to do big things in March, so give me the Badgers moving on. Next, we have the 7 versus 10 matchup of Ole Miss taking on Utah State. Utah State is a team that was playing extremely well, but has gotten blown out in their last 2 games by an average of 22 points. They're a great offense, but not that good of a defense. They share the basketball, but they also give up a lot of threes. And honestly, going up against an Ole Miss team that's just won their last 2 games, including a big win over Tennessee, I like the way that Ole Miss has been playing, especially Sean Padula, but also Dia and Brakefield. They've been playing absolutely great recently. So give me Ole Miss to win this matchup. And then we have Texas Tech taking on the 15-seeded Bryant. Bryant plays fast, top 10 in adjusted tempo, but going up against a Red Raiders team that Grant McCaslin has playing absolutely amazing, specifically JT Toppin, currently averaging 18 points, 9 rebounds per game, has led the team in points and rebounds in 7 out of their last 8. And I just like this team all around, not only for JT Toppin, but they also have Chase McMillan, Darian Williams, a bunch of different pieces that can go get them a bucket whenever they need. So give me the Red Raiders to move on in this matchup. Jumping over to the round of 32, we have the Florida Gators taking on the Creighton Blue Jays. I think this would be a very exciting matchup, especially between bigs. You got Ryan Kalkbrenner of Creighton taking on Alex Condon of Florida, who just had an absolutely incredible game against Bama with a 27-10 performance. I think Florida just has way too many guys. When you think Creighton, you think Ryan Kalkbrenner, you think Stephen Ashworth. But when you think Florida, you have Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Alex Condon, Will Richard, and even more guys that are coming off the bench as well. This Florida team is primed for a big March, and I got them advancing to the second weekend. Then we have our 2 upset picks taking on each other, which is McNeese versus High Point. I think this would be a really fun matchup for whoever wins to advance to the Sweet 16. And if I'm trusting one of these teams a little more, it's got to be Will Wade and the McNeese Cowboys. Again, as I mentioned, having an absolute incredible year. We saw them play great last year as well. Currently on a 9-game winning streak, top 70 in offensive and defensive efficiencies. I just like what McNeese is doing on the defensive side of things, which is why I'm picking them over High Point in this one. So give me McNeese moving to the Sweet 16. Then we have St. Mary's versus Wisconsin. We got the offensive side of things with Wisconsin going up against the defensive-minded St. Mary's. Randy Bennett has this team playing extremely well, led by Augustus Marshallonis and Mitchell Saxon, both who are seniors and wanting to make a big splash in their last year with the Gales, but I trust what John Tonji and Wisconsin has been doing as of late, so I got to take Wisconsin to beat St. Mary's in this one. Then we have Ole Miss versus Texas Tech, and I think I got to trust Grant McCasland and the Red Raiders in this one. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like this Red Raiders team has a lot of guys that I trust in the clutch, which is why I'm going to be picking them over Ole Miss. And that takes us to our Elite Eight. In our first matchup, we see the Florida Gators taking on the McNeese Cowboys, and this is where the Cinderella story comes to the end. Florida is just looking like one of the best teams in the nation right now, and I can't see McNeese being able to score with Florida, which is why I have Florida advancing. Then you have Wisconsin versus Texas Tech. Had to think long and hard about this one, but I'm going to be giving it to the Red Raiders for the sole purpose that I trust their defense a little more than I trust Wisconsin's, and I think their offenses are pretty similar. So give me the Red Raiders in this one. And then we have Florida versus Texas Tech in the Elite Eight. I think I got to go with the Gators in this one. Again, they have been one of the most impressive teams in the past 9-10 games. They're 8-1 in their last 9, and that win at Alabama really showed me something. They do not turn the ball over. Great defense, good team chemistry, play with a really good tempo as well. One of the few teams that's top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency according to KenPom, and I'm going to be taking the Gators to move on to the Final Four. Moving up and over to the East region, we have the Duke Blue Devils as our number 1 seed, taking on either Quinnipiac or Southeast Missouri State. And Duke, in my opinion, has looked like the best team in the country in the past month or two. Absolutely incredible the way that they've been playing as of late, and I do not see them getting upset in this first round. So give me the Blue Devils moving on. And then we have UConn as the 8 seed, taking on Vanderbilt as the 9 seed. Vanderbilt right now getting hot at the right time. They won 3 in a row versus ranked opponents, but recently lost to Arkansas. Taking on a UConn team that's also been playing extremely well as of late. 4-1 in their last 5, with that only loss coming to St. John's, which is the best team in the Big East, it seems, right now. I actually like the way that UConn is playing currently. McNeely has been scoring in double digits in 8 straight games. Really liking the way that they've been playing on the defensive side of things as well. And so I'm going to be picking UConn over Vanderbilt in this matchup. Then we have Missouri versus Yale. Missouri, I really like the team and the pieces that they have, but it just seems as of late they've been struggling. 1-3 in their last 4, and the 3 losses really haven't been to major teams in the SEC. You got losses to Arkansas, Vandy, and OU. They are a top 5 offense, 8th in points per game right now, averaging 85, and they shoot the ball extremely well, but their defense is what hurts them. Only 70th when it comes to defensive efficiency. And I've mentioned this before, I really like this Yale team. Led by John Polakaitis, who was a part of that team that upset Auburn in last year's NCAA tournament. Was on a 13-game winning streak until they lost at their rival Harvard by 5 points, but won the regular season title for the Ivy League. They're a high-scoring team as well, top 20 in points per game, so I expect this game to be very high-scoring, and they are great at shooting the 3, top 20 in three-point percentage as well. So I'm going to be picking Yale for my upset in this matchup over Missouri. Then we have Maryland taking on Liberty. Liberty has been an intriguing upset pick for me as of late. Just thinking through, their top 30 in adjusted defensive efficiency, actually number 1 in the country when it comes to 3-point defense. And they've been playing really well as of late. But I can't see Maryland getting upset in this first round. They're 6-1 in their last 7 games. They have one of the best starting 5s in the country. The thing that scares me a little bit about Maryland is their depth. But in the first round game, I don't think that's going to be an issue. So give me Maryland moving on to the round of 32. Then we have UCLA taking on UC San Diego, and UC San Diego is one of the picks that I'm extremely confident in as long as they get a good matchup, and I think this is a really good matchup for them. UC San Diego currently on a 12-game winning streak, 17-2 in the Big West Conference, top 50 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. And they're going up against a UCLA team that plays at a slower tempo, which is exactly what UC San Diego does. And both teams like to get up and force turnovers. UCLA's been just 3-3 in their last 6 games, alternating between wins and losses. And I feel like this is a good matchup for the Tritons, so I'm going to be picking UC San Diego to move on in this one. Then we have Iowa State taking on Northern Colorado. Iowa State recently just lost in double overtime to BYU, but they're finally getting everyone back from injury and healthy. And I feel like when this team is fully tooled, they're going to be able to make a good run in March. Again, really balanced. Top 10 defense, top 30 offense. They force turnovers, and I think that they're going to be able to turn Northern Colorado over a lot in this matchup. So it can be the Cyclones to move on. That leads us to the 7-seeded BYU Cougars taking on the 10-seed Ohio State Buckeyes. You got Igor Dimon, Richie Saunders, and the Cougars going up against Bruce Thornton and the Buckeyes there. BYU won 7 straight, including that game I just mentioned against Iowa State in double overtime in Ames. 11-2 in their last 13. One of the best offenses in the country. Going up against Ohio State. And they've won their last 2 games, but they do foul a lot, which is where I think BYU is actually going to be able to excel in this one. So I have the Cougars moving on to the round of 32. And that leads us to our last game between Alabama and South Alabama. Mark Sears and Grant Nelson are not going to let the Crimson Tide lose in the first round in this matchup. So I got Alabama moving on. Then we have Duke versus UConn in our first game of the round of 32. 2 great programs going at it in this one. Also, former high school teammates between Liam McNeely and Cooper Flagg, and I'm going to give the edge to Cooper Flagg in this one. In my opinion, the player of the year, he solidified that in the past couple of games and has been absolutely incredible, as well as his supporting cast, because it's not just him. This Duke team is the most talented team in the country. I think that helps them get past the UConn Huskies in this one. Then we have Maryland taking on the upset 12-seed Yale Bulldogs. Maryland, great size on them. I think that could give Yale some issues. And because of that great size, they also have great rebounding and a really good defense. Top 10 to be exact. And they also can score a lot themselves, being top 25 in points per game. I think Maryland can score just as much as Yale, and I think they have a better defense. So I got Maryland moving on to the second weekend. Then we have UC San Diego taking on the Iowa State Cyclones. And I wish I could pick UC San Diego to make it to the Sweet 16, but Iowa State's going to be a little too much. Again, as I mentioned, when this team is all back together and healthy, I think they're going to be a hard out for anyone. I got Iowa State moving on. Then we have Alabama versus BYU. What would be a very high-scoring game. 2 of the best offenses in the country, Alabama with one of the fastest tempos. And I think BYU could make this a really close game, especially with the way that they've been playing as of late. One of the best teams in the past month. But I'm going to have to give the edge to Mark Sears and the Crimson Tide. I think they're able to make it to the second weekend. Now on to the Sweet 16, where we see Duke versus Maryland, another competition between 2 of the best freshmen in the country, between Cooper Flagg taking on Derek Queen and the Maryland Terrapins. And Maryland, as I mentioned earlier, great size and great at rebounding, but Duke comes right back at them, being the tallest team in all of college basketball. I think that helps them prevail in this one. Also, the lack of depth for Maryland, I think at this point is when they could start affecting them a lot. So I got the Blue Devils moving on to the Elite Eight, where they'll be taking on either Iowa State and Alabama. And this matchup would be very interesting for me. Alabama, definitely the better offense, but Iowa State, the better defense. And I feel like I trust Iowa State's offense more than I do Alabama's defense. And just some of the games we've seen where Alabama, they'll score 90 points, but they'll give up 100 and lose. I think this could be one of those types of games where Iowa State is just able to hold on the defensive side and then score however they want on the offensive side. So I got the Cyclones moving on to face Duke in the Elite Eight. And this is a matchup I think everyone would enjoy. The one thing that's so impressive to me about this Duke team is not all the highlights, but it's the defense that this team plays. I think a lot of people forget they are the only team in KenPom's rankings that both top 5 in offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. They're one of the best defensive teams, and as of late, I mean, they have been dominating all of their opponents. 7-game win streak with an average win by 32 points per game. With the way that the Duke Blue Devils is playing right now, I just can't pick against them. I got to take Duke to move on to the Final Four out of the East region. Jumping down to our last region, we have the Midwest, where our 1 seed is the Houston Cougars taking on Omaha at the 16 seed. Omaha, a great story, won their regular season out of the Summit League, but I got to go with the Cougars in this one. I'm playing like one of the best teams in the nation, the best team in the Big 12 for sure. I think Kelvin Sampson and the Cougars get it done in the first round. They'll be taking on either Mississippi State or Gonzaga. Mississippi State, as of late, has been trending downwards, 1-3 in their last 4, lost to OU, Bama, and Texas. They're a pretty balanced team on both offense and defense, but Josh Hubbard, their star player, has to go off for this team to win in March, in my opinion. I think the Gonzaga Bulldogs just has a better all-around team. They're also playing extremely well as of late, 7-1 in their last 8, and their only loss coming to a St. Mary's team that's been playing absolutely great as well. One of the best teams on the offensive side of things, top 10 in offensive efficiency, also score a ton of points. I just don't know if Mississippi State's can be able to keep up with, so I got the Gonzaga Bulldogs moving on to the round of 32. Then we get to Clemson versus Drake, and if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know I love this Drake team. I think they're one of the best teams in all of the mid-majors. Ben McCollum has been absolutely incredible in his first year there, and Bennett Sturts is a name you need to know. Going into March Madness, averaging 19 points per game and 6 assists per game, and they're looking really good in the MVC tournament right now, but going up against a Clemson team that has been playing absolutely great in the past month as well. They're currently on a 7-game win streak, including that win against Duke. 17-2 in the ACC, so just right behind them there. And this team is just known for slowing the game down, getting teams to play on their terms, and getting those quality shots. They're also great shooting from three-point range, 38%. Very experienced with Ian Shefflin and Chase Hunter. Victor Locken coming in as the 7-foot center to give him really good size. I just trust this Clemson team a whole lot. Honestly, right now they're a 5 seed, but I think they're playing like a 3 or a 4 seed, so I got to go with Clemson over Drake in this one. Then we have Purdue versus Akron, and Akron's another team that I'm interested in picking in some of these as an upset. They play fast, 12th in adjusted tempo, and they're solid from both inside the arc and behind it. And going up against a Purdue team that's been struggling as of late, 2-5 in their last 7, just lost to Illinois in their last Big Ten regular season game. But I'm going to trust Matt Painter in this one. Also, I really like Braden Smith, and I think he can get the offense going against this Akron team. So I'm going to pick Purdue to move on in this matchup. Then we have Marquette going up against VCU. I've been very high on VCU. They were on a 9-game winning streak before just losing to Dayton on the road by 3. This team is a really good defensive team. They'll get up on you, force turnovers, rebound the ball well, also play at a little bit of a slower tempo. Going up against a Marquette team that's just 2-2 in their last 4 games with losses against both Villanova and Creighton. And I mentioned this in the last video, but they've only beat one for sure NCAA tournament team since December 8th, and that was their win back in January against Creighton. I think I'm going to go with VCU as the upset in this one. I really like what VCU has been doing in the A10 so far this year, and I think they have a chance to make some noise in March. So give me VCU moving on in this one. Then we have Texas A&M taking on Utah Valley. Texas A&M, probably the best story from the past week in college basketball. They were on a 4-game losing streak and weren't really that competitive in any of those games, and then just out of nowhere beat Auburn at home in an incredible fashion. Honestly, handled that game from start to finish, it seemed. They're the number 1 team in offensive rebounding, and really the thing that scares me with A&M is their inconsistencies on offense, but when you have a really good offensive rebounding team, you're sometimes able to handle that. Going up against a Utah Valley team out of the WAC that has been playing well, and we'll just have to see who wins that WAC conference tournament to who actually is going to get in, but I don't think it matters in this one. I got the Aggies moving on. Then we have Illinois taking on a struggling Baylor team. Illinois, very talented, won their last 3 games, including a win at Michigan and Purdue. One of the highest scoring teams in all of college basketball, over 83 points per game, as well as getting a lot of rebounds, around 43 per game. Taking on a Baylor team that's really good in their own right in offense, but this team just has had a lot of injuries. They also have Jeremy Roach, who isn't playing like they would expect. VJ Edgecombe is the bright spot for this team, as well as Norchad Omier. They've been playing pretty well as of late, but I'm going to have to go with Illinois in this one. I feel like after their struggles in the midseason, they're starting to turn it around and playing their best basketball going into March, which is what you want your team to be doing. So give me the Illini in that one. And then Tennessee versus Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut actually have one of the longest win streaks in the country out in the NEC, but this Tennessee team got that big win against Alabama earlier, and then we're on a 4-game winning streak before their loss at Ole Miss by 2 in their last game. One of the best, if not the best defense in all the country. I just don't think Central Connecticut's going to be able to score on them. So I got Tennessee moving on in that matchup. Jumping over to the round of 32, you have Houston versus Gonzaga. When we talk Houston, we talk about LJ Cryer and Jawan Roberts, but the one guy I really want to key in on in this one is Milos Uzan, who's been playing absolutely incredible. The point guard transfer from OU, I think he could give Gonzaga some problems with the way he's able to create for others, but also get into the paint, either get to the rim or hit that floater, which is why I'm going to be picking Houston to move on in this one. Then we have Clemson versus Purdue in our next matchup. As I mentioned earlier, Clemson, just a very experienced team, taking on a Purdue team that was just in the title game last year, but Purdue, they are terrible at defending the 2. Almost dead last and allowing roughly 56% from other teams when it comes to 2-point field goals. I think Clemson's going to take advantage of this. Not only can they stretch the floor, but when they start hitting from 3, Purdue's got to get out there, and that's going to open the lanes and allow them to get into the paint. I got Clemson winning this matchup and advancing to the Sweet 16. Then we have VCU taking on Texas A&M. VCU, a very great defensive team, top 25 in defensive efficiency, but what this Texas A&M team showed when they beat Auburn was extremely impressive, and if they can translate that into the NCAA tournament, I think that could take them extremely far. So I got Texas A&M advancing to the Sweet 16. Then we have Illinois taking on Tennessee. I actually went back and forth on this one because Illinois, I feel like they've really turned their season around, especially after they got beat bad by Duke in Madison Square Garden since then. Seems like they've been playing some of their best basketball, but I got to go with Tennessee. Just what they've shown and some of their big wins. When this Tennessee team can score, specifically when Chaz Lanier and Zakai Siegler, even Jordan Gainey, are giving you a lot of good stuff on the offensive end, they're extremely dangerous, and I think they could hold Illinois, especially because this Fighting Illini team doesn't shoot the best from 3, so I'm going to be taking the Volunteers to move on in this matchup. All right, we have Houston taking on Clemson in our first Sweet 16 matchup in this region, and I think this would be a really good game. Both teams are good on the defensive end, but can also score. I'm going to go with the Clemson Tigers in this one, and mainly it's because how they've been playing as of late. When they beat Duke, that was extremely impressive, and they've been riding that ever since, and I don't know if it's going to slow down. I think Clemson's just going to get quality shots. That's what they really seem to do, is every single time down the floor try and get the best shot that they can, and it seems to be paying off for them as of late. So give me the Clemson Tigers moving on. Then we have Texas A&M taking on Tennessee for an SEC matchup that we see here in the Sweet 16, and I'm going to be picking Tennessee in this one. Texas A&M on the offensive side can be a little too inconsistent for me, and I think Tennessee's defense is just a bit better than A&M, so I got the Volunteers moving on to the Elite 8, where they'll be taking on the Clemson Tigers. And in this matchup, I'm actually going to be going with the Clemson Tigers to move on to the Final Four to get the second ACC team in there. I just trust Clemson's offense more than Tennessee's when it comes to this game. I think Clemson can actually shut down Tennessee on the defensive side of things. And then on offense, I mean, they shoot 38% from 3, one of the best 3-point shooting teams. I think they can get some decent looks and score there, so it can be Clemson moving on to the Final Four. So in our Final Four, we see St. John's, Florida, Duke, and Clemson. And in our first matchup, we see St. John's taking on the Florida Gators. And this would be a great matchup. St. John's, one of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball, taking on a Florida team that's also very good on defense in their own right. but I trust the guys that Florida has a bit more than St. John's. I do like Kadari Richmond. I do like RJ Lewis, Zuby Ejiofor, but when you got a plethora of guys in Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard, Alex Condon, and more, it just seems like there's so many that if one guy's having a bad game, there's 2 or 3 more that are on. I just trust the Florida Gators to win that game and move on to the national championship. And they'll be facing off with either Duke or Clemson. This would be a rematch from the ACC, and in the most recent matchup, we saw Clemson beat Duke, but I don't think it's going to happen again. Duke didn't play their best game against Clemson, and that was in large part due to the defense that Clemson was playing on them, but I think John Shire and the Duke Blue Devils would be better prepared for this matchup, and again, with the way this team has been playing, I just don't know who's going to stop them, so I'm going to have the Blue Devils moving on to the national championship. So the final game is set. We have the Florida Gators and the Duke Blue Devils, and honestly, this is a matchup I really want to see. I feel like they both have a lot of guys that you can trust, a really good trio of guards. On the Duke side, you have Sion James, Tyrese Proctor, and Con Knipple going up against Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, and Will Richard. We have Alex Condon on one side, Kaman Malawach, but for me, the game changer is Cooper Flagg. I just don't know if Florida has anybody that can match Cooper Flagg and what he can do on both the offensive end and the defensive end. Honestly, I think he's going to be player of the year with the way he's played, and it would be absolutely deserving. One of the best prospects that we've seen in college basketball. I think it's going to end with Cooper Flagg and the Duke Blue Devils being national champions. Let me know in the comments what you think of the predictions, and who do you think is going to make it to the Final Four in the upcoming NCAA tournament? If you've been enjoying the content, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.